I'd like to call the October 3rd, 2024 Montecito Board of Architectural Review to order. First item is public comment. Is there anybody who'd like to address the board on something that's not on the agenda today, please?
And not seeing any hands online.
Very good. Agenda status report.
We do have one change to the agenda. Actually, there's a note about it on the agenda. The applicant for our consent agenda item at 624 5 Para Grande Lane is requesting a continuance to your next meeting on October 17th.
Do we need a motion for that? No? Okay, very good. Thank you. Minutes, we are not going to have the minutes today. They didn't get out. MBAR informational briefings. Anybody go anywhere, do anything, please? Staff update. Moving right along. Item number of Montecito consent agenda. We just announced that item was not heard today. Conceptual review. Laurel and team, if you'd like to come on up.
Good afternoon, board members. I'm Laurel Perez with SEPS Land Use Consulting. It's a pleasure to be here on behalf of Lotus Land. And here comes, yay! Just in the nick of time. Real quick, I'll just describe where we are in the permit review process. We've been working with planning and development staff for a director amendment and a land use permit for the proposed improvements that we'll be presenting today. For the Lotus Land Gardens, and the project involves relatively minor improvements to enhance the visitor experience, specifically a new restroom, a restored and relocated greenhouse, a new bus turnout, and it also involves a stormwater storage component. It's been Lotus Land's long-term goal to improve sustainability across the gardens, and so you'll hear more about that today. And I'd like to introduce our team. We have with us Kaylee Greb from Arcadia Studios, our land use site planner and landscape extraordinaire, Serena Edelson from Harrison Design, Robert Schmidt with Flowers Associates. Behind us, we have our Lotus Land Executive Director, Rebecca Anderson, Director of Operations, Adam Flint, and I think a Board of Trustee member, Laura Bridley, who's also a land use expert, may be joining us today too. So with that, I'll hand it over to Kaylee.
David, do you have the mobile mic? So I can. All right, so Kaylee with Arcadia Studio. And so I'm going to divide up today's presentation into kind of two sections. There's 4 areas that we're going to, that are within the scope of this project. But we'll start with the area that's along Sycamore Canyon Road and corner of Ashley. So if you're familiar with Lotus Land, this is the main entrance on Ashley, on Cold Springs Road, not Ashley. And so currently operationally, Lotus Land has identified they need a school bus turnout. It's not for additional buses. They have a current kind of pass through for buses, but they really need a safe space to park the buses. So that's the first scope of work we'll be looking at. The second area is adjacent to it across what was historically the main drive of Lotus Land, but is no longer used as an entrance for the current operations of the garden. There's an area that is currently in a eucalyptus grove where it's also the confluence of where a lot of stormwater comes to the bottom of the property at Lotus Land. It's not an area of the garden that's currently on tour or a developed garden. And during the storms of last year and prior to that, they have been losing a lot of significant eucalyptus in that grove. And it had become an emergency situation at various points. There's utility lines running along Sycamore here. And so Lotus Land would like to be able to remove some or most of those ukes in a more controlled manner. That they've already also been getting some concerns from local neighbors. The trees are tall enough that they can do damage to adjacent properties as well. And then we've also identified this as a location for some water catchment and water storage on site because Lotus Land currently doesn't have enough water storage. They have enough access to water for for the most part, but in times of drought, the hottest seasons of the month, they don't have enough storage currently for their irrigation needs on the property. So we've identified that as our kind of water catchment area scope that I'll further explain the sheets, and then we'll move on to the other two areas in a minute. So if we can move to the next sheet, David. So it's very grainy up here, but to further explain the bus turnout, the parking lot at Lotus Land is also the Australian garden, which was kind of developed in response to having some of the eucalyptus there and some of the Australian species. And so this area of the garden would be removing 2 eucalyptus, but it's been cited to minimize its impact to the overall Australian garden as much as possible. We've identified several sites in the parking lot, and everything else, all the other locations had more impact. And this also gives us a good opportunity to be able to give easy access back to the visitor center for any guests getting off the bus. That will be just an expansion of the existing materials, concrete curb and gutter and asphalt parking lot. And then we'll go to those 2 sites in a minute. We can go to the next. Can we go to page, I believe it's 14 of this set? Maybe not. It's the landscape sheets. It might have gotten subdivided in the box file. Try the So while we're getting there, Lotus Land has a really unique condition where the water, stormwater comes onto site, and we don't often get this condition on properties in Montecito, but there's a confluence of stormwater that comes through some storm drains, and Robert can explain this better in a minute, and daylights in this eucalyptus area. And so it's a really exciting opportunity to be able to capture that water that otherwise is creating somewhat of a nuisance in that area.
So we had some superseded documents. Was it included in that, maybe?
No, you know what we had to do is we had to separate. If you go down to that last attachment, David, you might be able to open it. No, one more down. Just, there you go. If you open that, that's the full plan set. Oh, no, I guess not. What we are instructed to do is separate a plan set into manageable size, megabyte size. And so that's what you're looking at there. Were
Maybe,
you looking for the landscape sheets?
yeah, the
Or
tree.
tree remove with they were there, I think. So David, if you go back to, I think it's the 3rd attachment. There you go. Open that.
Okay. So,
Maybe.
so stormwater catchment is part of the scope that we'll be explaining today. And then additionally, this area of Lotus Land is partially an existing tropical garden that Lotus Land has always planned to expand a bit, but it's a large area to have a fully tropical garden. So they've also been exploring expanding their native kind of buffer zone, healthy insectary areas, and just basically native buffer. And so we had the thought, because this is such a water focused area of the site, that it can be in the future a riparian type native garden. And in the short term, we would want to reestablish the canopy and just the native canopy if we are going to remove the eucalyptus So we're proposing all natives in the zone that we're kind of categorizing as a riparian garden, and then transitioning to a few tropical species as we head towards the tropical garden, but mixing it in with some native oaks as well. I think we'll go through catchment in a second. I'll just locate, we're proposing a bioinfiltration basin, a series of them before the water. So the water comes from the existing swales and would be diverted into, or directed into the series of infiltration basins, and then into the reservoir with some pre-treatment ahead of its entry into the reservoir. This graphic I did not realize was going to be presented today, so we've just added some color coding to the exact same information if you're okay with me passing it out, but otherwise I can just explain general species locations.
I'd love to see it.
Okay, there's no change in information, it's just color coding. I think there should be a copy for everyone. So as I mentioned, all in this area, it's predominantly all Quercus agrifolia, Platanus racemosa, all our native sycamore, native oaks, and some native bays. And then we transitioned to a few Michaelias and jacarandas and things that will augment the tropical garden and kind of help us transition into that existing garden. Whoops, sorry. Oh, sorry. So I'll just give you a second to take a look at that. And I think we can move into the water catchment. Yeah, you can either location.
You know, I'll probably walk up there. Can you go to, I think it's number 3. And then, is there multiple pages here? Go to number 2. I saw it earlier. Go back. I think. I'll keep going here. There we go. Go back 1 page. Perfect. Okay, so just to kind of walk you through what our kind of big picture to this, as Kaylee had said, there's 2 drainage channels that go through here. One of them is right here where it drains through the property. That actually is a storm drain pipe that comes from Cold Springs, which is sheet flow all the way down to this. So we found a perfect opportunity that 150 plus acres actually drains to this drainage channel. And then we have a second drainage channel that picks up the entire site that pretty much comes right here and ends right here. So what our goal was is we had 2 components. It was a great opportunity to be able to pick up stormwater when there's rainy season. You have your 2 bioretention areas for low flows. You can see water comes in, drains into these for kind of low flow treatment. Bigger storms, what we have is we have a catchment that goes, this is a pre-treatment if it bypasses and goes into this. This is pretty much looks like this. It's a prefab underground system that holds 200,000 gallons of water. We would have pre-treatment before it goes into there. And then what we also have is we will have a pump that pumps it back into the irrigation system itself. So then it will feed the existing irrigation line that is a loop through the site.
Before we move on to the other 2 areas, I just want to mention we have had an arborist report done by Bill Spiewak and a biological resources report. The arborist wasn't concerned with mitigation for the eucalyptus necessarily, and but I'll show you in the 2 other areas there was some impact to oaks, and so we're mitigating for that impact in this area of the garden. And so and those reports have both been completed. I don't know if they're in this package because they might have been in progress when they were being when this was submitted. And then there's no biological resource. There's no monarchs in these eucalyptus, and we don't have any overlays, biological overlays in this area. If we could go back to the overall. There we go. So the 2 other pieces of the proposal today are Lotus Land has identified an immediate need for restrooms for their current operations in this location of the garden. Currently, the only restrooms that are open to visitors are at the visitor center at the entrance, and it is a very long distance to walk back to the restroom, especially with the intricate gardens. It's pretty circuitous to get back there. So currently Lotus Land has a temporary facility in that location, and it's proven to be very necessary. So we're proposing the restrooms in this location. They're really well shrouded from all public views. It's really we've nestled it within dense screening. There are oaks around it, and we've kind of threaded the needle to minimize our impact to any individual oak in that location. So we'll look at that a little closer. And then there's a little greenhouse that I'll show you the photos in a second, that is currently falling apart, to be honest, in the greenhouse operation area of Lotus Land. And Lotus Land would like to rebuild it and then relocate it where it can be viewed as part of the tours in the fern garden. So Serena will go into a little more detail on that. Let's go to the next sheet, I think has the blow-ups. So this is the restroom. so grainy on the screen. There's this little clearing within the oaks, trying to minimize this, again, any significant impact on any one tree. So you can see the oak centers are here, here. This is the closest one and why we're mitigating. And then long-term, these restrooms may also be accessed from the cactus garden, which is adjacent to the left here. But currently the accessible route will be from, sorry, can we go back to the overall one more time? From Bonsai Road. And so we're proposing a path through there. We're not proposing a planting plan in here. Lotus Land really values the health of the oaks, of course, and it's currently just oak leaf duff in there, and it's not proposed in that area to become a new added garden. It's just needed in there, and it's really beautiful just with the oak canopy as is. And then the greenhouse, Serena can go through a little detail.
I'd be more than happy to talk you through the details specifically. So David, if you'd be so kind to go to PDF page 7 in this first. And funny enough, the architectural's got like reverse chronological, so I'll just have you walk backwards. Okay, so the first design here is for the proposed restrooms. You can see in the plan, we're keeping the footprint very conservative. We really just want to kind of serve the guests here at Lotus Land. It's just 19.5 feet by like 23.5 feet, but provides really nice facilities for 2 single-use restrooms, utility storage, 2 benches, and a drinking fountain and water bottle filler. So that's kind of the functional use of this proposed restroom. And back one slide. Great. And so the fun stuff is the architectural detailing. So interestingly, the buildings on Lotus Land's property, the main residence originally for the Givett family was designed by Reginald Johnson. And then there were renovations done to that and additional structures built over the course of years after by George Washington Smith. And so we kind of looked to both architects to inform the design articulation here. And so, of course, the overall like massing is very much like an homage to the pavilion. Most of you are probably familiar with that small little building just next to the lotus pond with the sweet double arches. And so you see that, of course, in the facade and just the building's massing in general. The windows, we propose plaster kind of grills. And again, this is all quite conceptual at this point. So we are always looking forward to your points of view. But proposed plaster grills that are very much in the George Washington Smith style. And then on the front facade, we actually are including some stepped plaster detailing above this archway. And refined columns, which are a little bit more in the style of Reginald Johnson, who, is a big advocate for, bilateral symmetry. And so you see that here. So we wanted to certainly, kind of incorporate elements from both architects instead of just like a carbon copy George Washington Smith. Okay, next slide, I guess one previous. Perfect, is the greenhouse. So this is a tiny little greenhouse. We can always take a look at the images of the greenhouse that is in its current state is truly falling apart and is actually now a kind of dangerous area and not usable to Lotus Land. And so our team, though, did brave the conditions and took field measurements there. So the drawings you see here are exactly like for like of the current greenhouse. And so you see that here, plan sections, and then the previous slide is elevations. Lovely. And then the slide previous is actually the little architectural details. So it's certainly utilitarian. It will just serve the use of Lotus Land for fern propagation. And then it's just visible to viewers from the exterior. I think that concludes the designer's presentation. And so we're going to pass the mic over to Laura Bradley.
Good afternoon, members of the Empire. My name is Laura Bridley. Actually serve as a trustee on the Lotus Sun board, but I was a permit planner hired by them about 34 years ago to get it open to the public. So I have this crazy history on the site and all the ways it's actually changed. I'm really delighted to have this team here as I'm part of. They don't know whether I'm a trustee or a planning consultant, but here I am. Anyway, I just wanted to make sure that you understood the big picture of Lotus Sand. They've spent a long time doing a master plan. These are the first, little pieces of it. Will be coming back to the county for a major CUP change with a couple other structures and some changes to the operating permit. But I also want to make sure that you could come to the garden at any time and either contact me or anyone on the team for a site visit whenever you want to do that. If you want to, I think you can do 2 at a time. That's fine. So it would help because this isn't before you take final action anyway at a later date to see where these places are in the garden. So whenever you want to do that, just let us know. And happy to answer any questions, but I think the team showed everything. So thank you.
You done, Laura?
We are. Thank you very much.
Okay, mostly landscape. Let's get started with Stacy, please.
Yeah, it's lovely, but the main questions that I have having to do with the water storage, are we reutilizing the water back to the gardens?
Yes.
Okay, and then two, what are you doing aesthetically enhancement wise? I mean, how are the basins looking? Are they planted basins? Is it going to feed another look back to the rest of the garden?
Yes. So long-term, so the scope of work right now, we are really trying to reforest that area once the basins are in. And then once they're established, we're going to plant it as a riparian garden, and I'm sure we'll be returning. But right now, we really want to establish that canopy before we try to plant a lot of shade plants, and they just won't thrive in that environment yet. So it'll be contoured and planted with the overstory, and then the garden below it will be developed.
Okay.
Later on.
Those are my main questions.
Rob,
you.
questions, please.
So I had the privilege of touring the garden in the early 80s, and Donna was still alive, and we were told to be quiet because she was sleeping inside. So my question is, I heard that you folks are talking about kind of moving some of the theme to kind of a California native. And my question for you was there some kind of manifesto or some kind of directive from Ghana that pushed for that? Because this garden was really known for its tropicals, its subtropicals, and it's extraordinary. And so to hear that you're moving away from that, I'm kind of wanting where that kind of came from.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So we're actually, it might be better if I walk up there. We're expanding the tropical garden over time. The long-term plan for Lotus Land is to expand the tropical garden from right now. This is the existing path, and so it's consolidated into this area. And so the long-term plan is to really expand it to take up much more of the of just that open space that's under the eucalyptus currently, and to expand an education area, just an outdoor space for the children to gather when they get off the bus. And so the riparian reference is more because we wanted to be able to replant with native trees along the buffer zone, along the, to layer back from the streetscape. And so that area it's basically going to be a buffer area that will be the riparian garden.
So just to be clear, so you're not replacing
No,
subtropical, tropical thing.
Not at all.
You're actually expanding.
we're expanding
Okay,
it.
I
Exactly.
misunderstood then.
We just wanted to balance it. It's a very large area, and we don't want to, it would be an immense irrigation demand to expand
Okay.
to a full tropical in that entire area.
Okay. Thank you. One quick architectural question on sheet A3, that elevation you show. On the door, what is the height of that door and the height of those columns? You know,
I would
anybody
have
know?
to double check. Again, this is at a conceptual stage, and so we'll really dial in all the architectural elements. But I think we would propose, an appropriate 7-foot height arches minimum, and then the door is, obviously going to be at least code minimum 6'8".
Okay, well, I'll save, I have further comment on that, and I'll save for comments, I guess, so thank you.
Questions, Dave, please.
There any historical resource constraints or review of the project, or are you free on that?
Thank you. No, actually, Post Hazeltine reviewed the entire plan set and confirmed that there aren't any potential concerns with respect to historic resources. They actually looked at the entire gardens too in relationship to these three elements that we're considering, I guess, considering the bus pullout, but no impact to historic resources.
And they're considering both structures and landscape.
That is correct. Yep.
Thanks.
Bill, please, questions.
Yeah, has there been what I was going to ask is what do you see in that rain garden area, that is it all below grade? Is the catch basins underground? Is it going to be rock riprap, sort of gravel, sand, plant material, very much like you'd want to come and visit it and see it and say, hey, look what we're doing, like they've done at the botanical gardens, and expressing the
Yes.
way, hey, this is how you do this.
Exactly. That is the long-term intent, is to create basically an educational area. We're going to expand, the visitor tours will be able to, we'll have an accessible path the long-term plan is. So that's kind of phase 2. The reservoir is fully going to be underground, and then the bio-infiltration basins will of course be visible from above. And so we are going to be, Lotus Land really has a strong educational component. So that will be a really important gathering point for the water reuse and just sustainable resource management that Lotus Land does on site already. And so the bioinfiltration basins are intended to be mostly planted basins. Are we going to end up with any stone in the bottom of them? Okay, so they'll be entirely like seasonal ponds. Yeah, but not with standing water because we don't want too much algae to grow. So.
For mosquitoes.
Yeah.
Also, what's the bus pullout material going to be? Is it asphalt in the turnaround right now?
Yeah.
Correct. It'll be asphalt, just matching what's already there.
And is there any reason or consideration to do any other kind of a paver or something like that? Have you thought about that as an option?
We haven't explored it with Lotus Land. It's a relatively small area, so we were thinking just to tie in and avoid any trip hazards or anything. But if there, as we move through plan check, if there's any stormwater issue, we're also doing such a massive stormwater component that we're hoping we're having a net massive benefit to the site. But.
And how many trees do you suspect you'll remove? Those are non-natives anyway.
They're not, and they're almost exclusively ukes. There were a few pittosporums. I think it's around 94. It's a lot, but many of them are the babies of the mama and papa trees in there. So there's just like, it was almost too many to count. So we counted as many as we could, but yeah, somewhere.
Will that be a pretty visible clearing too from the street, you think, or?
Skyline wise, will be, they have grown like through the utilities and much, they're very tall. So they are visible from the public right away. But I think the net impact once the canopies of the native trees grow and is going to be so much more beneficial and much less looming and more part of the surrounding canopy of
Maybe
the neighborhood.
even open the views up from the street to the mountains. But
Yeah, it could in certain views. Yeah.
great. Thank you. That was it.
Yep, please, questions?
No questions.
Robert, questions?
Okay. So the visitor's entrance remains off of Cold Springs, or is it going to be on Sycamore Canyon?
Cold Spring. Sycamore Canyon is an unused entrance. It was just the historic.
Okay.
driveway.
And, the address is Ashley Road. What happens along Ashley? Nothing, or?
That's the staff entrance, is my understanding, where they would receive mail, et cetera.
Okay, no more questions.
Okay, restrooms. Is this going to trigger path of travel?
We've been discussing that. So I think the restrooms, we have a clear path of travel because we have a road that we can access, lane that we can access the path from. We have been exploring whether it's going to trigger path of travel for the bus turnout, because when it gets to the building department, whether it's parking or regular use, we have a route that we can create for path of travel if it's
It's going to go right across the lawn, right?
for the restrooms. So the accessible path of travel will come down.
I'm just asking, accessible path of travel can have a fairly important impact.
Yeah.
Greater than 5%, you've got to have handrails. That lawn is already at a reasonable slope. How do people get there that are in wheelchairs? Have you thought about it, please?
We have, and we continue to think about it. Lotus Land has a long-term accessibility plan for implementing section by section, making the garden holistically more accessible. Right now, because of these locations of the restrooms, the accessible path is most likely coming. This is a relatively flat road or lane through here. And so we're peeling off with a less than 5% slope path to the restrooms here. Long-term, a previous accessibility exhibit that was done for the garden shows an accessible route through the Dunlap garden. And so we may add an additional access to the restrooms from the cactus garden.
Be prepared. My guess is it's going to be more than that. We'll see what they do.
Okay.
Okay. Why aren't the new restrooms up near the main building, please? I know it's already there. You've explained that. But functionally speaking, there's from the parking lot up through that main road. I was there about a month ago. Okay, I hadn't been there a long time, but I'm one of the neighbors and I was invited over. So up that main road and somewhere up near there, that seemed to be where the activity center was, where I would expect gatherings. There was some juices and things or water. Why isn't it up there, please? It freestanding or not, but why isn't it up there, please?
Yeah, so they currently have a couple restrooms in the main residence that's
Yes.
his offices. They don't allow most of the time they don't allow visitors in there because it's it has old plumbing. But the way the tours work, these restrooms will really be for tours. They can be used for events, but Lotus Land does need to bring in restrooms for most event when they have a larger gathering. But these restrooms will augment that because they're accessible from the main lawn. But the way the tours run, they've kind of tested their theory that that was the location they need because they've hidden some temporary restrooms there for several years, correct? And it has been the location that has been most useful to the garden over their test.
Okay, let's stay with chapter 11B. The width of the doors and particularly the openings on the side, I don't think is wide enough. And I think that the building could be more gracious if it were expanded a little tiny bit to make things a little bit more easy to maneuver. And I think it's 24 inches, not 18 in this particular case.
We'll certainly check.
Yeah, okay. So now, civil engineer,
Yes.
you're going to filter the water going down there because it's going to have some kind of road stuff.
We're going to get the first runoff. That's what we're treating for.
Okay,
Then
so
we're working with Lotus Land on what level so that it works with the planting too. So we're still in the process of, we have a pre-treatment, we may have an additional treatment.
okay, and had you thought about an underground basin storage in addition to the above ground?
We have both. So you have the above, that's your low flow, and then the below ground is actually the large one itself.
Okay, and it's part of these plans.
Yeah, yes,
That doesn't matter. I didn't see it.
it's a
Okay.
50 by 50, that's going to be 10 feet tall. So it's a pretty good structure underground that holds 200,000 gallons.
Now, I love Ralph Waterhouse and I love his eucalyptus paintings. But I also live north of 192 And so there are a number of trees along Cold Spring Road that are not in discussion today. In the master plan, is there discussion to reduce or eliminate the ukes on that property, please?
Hi, Rebecca Anderson, Executive Director. Many neighbors have expressed concern over the eucalyptus, and we have so many on the property that it is daunting when we're looking at how to attack this in a way that is sensitive to the neighborhood, appropriate for other projects. And so this became the priority area. We do have budgeted next year a tree evaluation campus-wide, and we pay a lot of money and spend a lot of time on our arborists who we contract to come in and do tree care. So perhaps as needed long-term, I think your questions about the views and the screening are really important. And we want to make sure that everything we do, we're doing with neighborhood support and endorsement. So yes, all of those trees in time, particularly in the storms in 2023 and 24 winter, those trees were falling over and crushing through the pink wall, and we had a lot of emergency repairs to do. So anything we can do now through this larger effort on Sycamore Canyon and then ultimately on Cold Spring is preventative maintenance.
With the goal of eliminating all of them over time, or no? At
I
this point,
think because we have this Australian garden in that particular area, I don't imagine a day when we will have no eucalyptus trees.
Laurel, you mentioned that there was a master plan in the works. Would you be able to provide that to this board at the next review of this item, even if it's very much conceptual, even though it's very much in flow, please, so we can see the extent of the work
Mhm.
that is being considered?
I think Laura wants to respond to this one.
Sounds like it, yeah.
Oh, the master plan is the basis for our conditional use permit application, and that will be submitted probably early in 25. So when that's done and it's part of our concomitant CUP revision, we'd be happy to provide that to you. We can give you a sheet of it. It's just that it has other elements and we're still working through it. So if you can hang on until when we submit for the CUP revision, maybe that could work. Does that make sense?
It does.
Thank you.
Okay, public comment. Is there anybody that would like to address the board on item number 1695 Ashley Road, Lotus Land, please?
If you're joining us on Zoom, go ahead and raise your hand if you'd like to speak on this item. No hands raised, but I do believe we have a comment letter on this one.
You do? Oh, we have a letter? I didn't realize that. I see that the MBAR is reviewing the design for submitted changes for Lotus Land. I would like you and the committee members to consider the following. Lotus Land is loved by the community and has thought for a long time about its master plan that you see with this application. Please approve it. The modest revisions to the 37-acre campus are wonderful in keeping with the incredible setting of Lotus Land and has been so thoughtfully laid out and designed. It will be seamless and totally compatible with other Lotus Land features, but also to neighboring properties. The quality of the small additions to Lotus Land, a second restroom, et cetera. Okay, and the elegance of the proposed restroom building. Okay, sincerely, David, whoever that is. Okay. Yeah, it's Laurel's husband probably or something. Okay, anybody else, please? Okay, so we have a conceptual review before us. Back in the same order, Stacy, please.
Even though it looks like the letter was written by somebody who works there, I do agree, though, that it has been very carefully thought out. And these are relatively modest interventions, with exception being the stormwater retention area. But I agree with it because I used to work across the street from Lotus Land and watched as the eucalyptus were falling. But also too, I think an important component that you guys are leaving out, and why I think it also needs to be managed, and I think this is smart, is reducing the eucalyptus over time because of fire management as well. Because that area is just like a tinderbox, and to protect the rest of the garden, I feel like, yes, you have to reduce them, but not eliminate all of them. Because yes, aesthetically, the eucalyptus with the pink wall is just classic Lotus Land. But I also see the benefit of transitioning to more native gardens, especially in the perimeter sections. As we also too create more habitat for native insects and birds. And I think having the wetland there and going full force into it being more of a riparian garden is one of the things that the garden was missing previously and wasn't well thought out. And I know you lost a huge oak tree, I think in the March storm as well, that was impaired mainly by the water that comes through the garden now in these huge storms. And to take advantage of the resource and keeping it, especially if we go through another drought, I think it's imperative. I mean, I would even support possibly a larger reservoir below ground to kind of manage. It's 16 acres over time, especially when you have tropicals and subtropicals that we'd like to still see. So, and the bathroom, I think the greenhouse, of course, it's just keeping it, moving it and making it useful. Makes sense, especially if you turn it into a fernery. And the bathrooms, I agree with John that I wouldn't mind if they're a little bit larger, actually. They almost seem diminutive a little bit. And if it's going to be a really nice structure and really add long-term, I could see it being a little larger as well. And the fourth component, I believe, oh, the bus turnout, I mean, it's just access and it's in the parking lot, so I really have no issue with that. That's it.
Rob, comments, please.
Sure. One quick question. Is there, and I haven't been there for several years, is there any area on the garden that's a tribute to Ghana and that talks about her life and her mission statement for this?
There are a few, so I just wanna make sure
So it's a great question, and it's one that we're working on. The Visitor Center has had some recent updates. We have a little shaded area, and we put in some freestanding signage there and throughout the garden that is interpretive signage. So there we have images of Ghana and other historical contributors to the property. We have plants of note, some design notes, and people have really enjoyed seeing those. We currently have in the works a beautiful kind of tile mural map that an artist is making that's helping with wayfinding, and we will put the mission statement up in that area at the Visitor Center for people to really know when they've arrived that we are a nonprofit public garden, because we do think that's missing at the moment. We also have a new digital guide, and well, none of us want a lot of technology in the garden. We have a Bloomberg apps, it's called Bloomberg Connects app that has kind of pocket interpretation, and that talks a lot about our mission and our founder and her vision. So,
And maybe this is where I differ a little bit with Stacy. I think what Stacy's saying about kind of the overall habitat is great, but I do worry that I guess encourage that this doesn't become kind of a replication of the Botanic Gardens, because the Botanic Gardens has kind of a native, theme that they portray for folks. And so I think Lotus Land is kind of unique in that it's had these kind of tropical, subtropical, and just unusual plants. So I guess I think that to me would be, don't lose sight of that, I guess. And the only reason I mentioned that was because the first comment, and maybe I interpreted that wrong, was that you were replacing.
I'm really glad you asked, and I think I want to really reassure you and everyone that that is not our intent or goal or plan in any way. It's really this very narrow perimeter area, and that's for all the reasons that you mentioned, there are benefits to doing that, but that's not on public view. And our mission is very distinctly different from the Botanic Garden, even though we celebrate and partner with them in plant preservation and conservation work, but they're natives and we're not. And that's not changing.
Okay, thank you. So I think if you can kind of weave and some of the comments Stacy made about kind of the environmental, nature of which she's trying to accomplish on the overall facility is nice, but I'm glad to hear that you're kind of preserving what I think was the essence of Lotus Land. And then going into the weeds, on sheet A3, can we pull that up? I just, this is more of an architectural, maybe the other architects could address, but it seems the proportion of that door and the way it fits in the frame is a little awkward, or a little bit like the door feels really big. So I was kind of struck by that. I don't know if one of the architects can comment on that, but anyways, those are my comments. Thank you.
Dave, comments, please.
Well, in general, I really support everything you're doing. You've obviously been thoughtful about integrating these improvements with the existing park. And also, I understand that it's been done with historians, so that you're doing that correctly, which is important to me. So my main concern is that it's difficult to read these plans of this structure. I understand you're relating it to other structures on the property and to a couple of the architects. For the next round, it'd be very helpful to have some of that imagery and then have better renderings that really help us understand these drawings and scale figures, because the scale of the building's difficult to understand. I'm not against the style and everything, but there's not enough here to really evaluate it from my perspective. And I think that's what Rob was struggling with too. So renderings or inspirational images, explain what those recesses in the plaster are, because when I see this, it's hard to understand what it is. So a lot more information on this building would help me support you. And those are my comments.
Bill, please.
Yeah, no, I think I'm in agreement with most of the other board members. I like what you're doing. I like the idea of making that little area down below where you're creating more of a storm garden idea, of making that kind of an interpretive area where people can learn. I think that's great. I'll leave the planting materials to the landscape architects for what goes in there. I like the structures. I agree too that the bathroom probably feels a little tight, in terms of the access. So I would be okay with it a little larger. To Dave's point, a little more detail and some photos of what's out there so we can compare. I'm sure that your detailing is going to match, and that's kind of what we're trying to achieve. The greenhouse, I don't have any problem with. On the pullout, my only suggestion there is if it feels like it's a big field of asphalt, I would say think about a different color, breaking that up. Maybe it's a brown tan colored asphalt and black asphalt. Just if it doesn't feel to you like it's going to be just this massive paved area, because that's at the entry, I think, when you walk in, right?
Yeah, it's a
More or
little
less.
before.
Yeah.
But yes,
Maybe just think about
noted.
that.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I like what you're doing and keep going. Yeah.
Tip, comments, please.
Yes, I'm going to just focus on this building. I just feel that it's a little bit proportionally little bit odd in terms of maybe the overhangs is a little too small. Maybe the windows are a little bit too low, and it's a little bit peculiar. You can look at that even as a small building. I believe it could be a little much better looking and proportionally a little better. And David, can I see the greenhouse? It's the same could be said about the greenhouse. Something low, peculiarly, for example, it seemed like the door seemed rather tall compared to the proportion of the greenhouse. And it's a greenhouse, all right, but it could also be a little bit more refined in terms of detailing and scale. Maybe we can see more of that at the next phase. Thank you.
Robert, comments, please.
Yeah, I'm gonna stick to architecture, except I am concerned about losing too many eucalyptus along Sycamore Canyon because I know, having been in there a lot, I grew up on Ashley Road. They provide shade that helps those certain types of plants survive. So it's not just a aesthetic thing from the neighbors in Sycamore Canyon. I think you got to worry a bit about the ecosystem there, the microclimate. You know, you go down there even on a hot day and it's cool and shady. I understand that the ukes are Roman candles, but I'd like to see what you may propose. As far as the architecture goes on the bathrooms, if you go back to that sheet, please, David. You know, I think you could lower that plate 6 inches or a foot and it would be more proportional. I also think you could make the wing walls on right and left like a foot bigger each, and it would be more like the main, the building at the Lily Pond. And, you know, that square door within those arches, why not make it arched and spring it at the same point? Anyway, that's it for me.
The reason I went to path of travel is that there's that lawn that goes down that in a sense is a peninsula. And I think you're going to cut right across it with a path. If the building department does what I think it probably should do, I think that that's what's going to happen. I just want to make sure that you get that well integrated so that you guys are driving the boat and they're not. I think that it would be to your personal advantage to have photographs of the building at the Lotus Pond and some of the drawings. So that was a George Washington Smith building, right? Get his details, put them right on your drawings, right next to your drawings, right next to your details. Because I think that, you know, I see that building on the front cover of stuff and it's, you know, there's a reason. It's a remarkably beautiful building. I think that would help explain what it is you're trying to do. Climate change, wetter wets, drier dries. That's the general overall current thinking globally. We can expect more water coming down Cold Spring Road and falling on this, and we can expect drier conditions where it's harder to have water. Now is the time and the only time to consider enlarging those basins to account to help as a buffer. Because everything that we have in our lifetimes is no longer relevant. Okay, so please think about that. I know it's more money, but think about it. And I think that if you're able to enlarge things, it will be to your personal benefit. Okay, we're on for concept today. What do we want to do with this thing next? They want a final approval, but you know, do we want to see it at the full board? Do we want to see it at consent? What do you want to do, guys?
Well, okay. I think it should come back to the full
Full
board.
board.
Yeah, there's enough comments and it's such an important facility that I think it'll serve everybody better.
And for preliminary and final,
Yeah.
correct? Next
Yeah,
time around?
Yeah.
Okay, and I know that you blew me off on the master plan. Please don't. Bring it along. It doesn't have to be complete. Just say, we want to do something over here. We want to do something so we can kind of get an idea. It's not part of the official presentation or the official application, but it will help us get an idea so that we're not completely in the dark. Okay, thank you very much. Item number 2, we had a site visit today, 605 Coles Road. Is there anybody here? Shelby is here.
We've got a whole slew of people for you online.
Okay,
I'm Andrew Petrovsky, the architect with Michael Amber Architects, joined by my colleague Chris. And then just because there's so many people present, I'll just name you the disciplines of who we've got online in case anybody needs to reach out to them as a resource pool. We've got civil engineer, construction management, expediter, lighting, and landscape. So we've got plenty of people for whatever questions you need answered. If we could start with the Arch 605, please. So rather than run you through the entire design as if you're seeing it for the first time, I'd like to mainly focus this presentation a little bit more towards the feedback we received last time around and how we addressed it, and also some of the feedback and questions that came up during the course of the site visit today. So the first comment from last time around was the story pole, so I'm going to save that until after I've addressed the different architectural and site items that I'd like to address. That ties into it, but that's, you know, a broader recap to go over, seeing as you were all out at the site today. Simplifying and unifying the design. That is something that we've taken to heart. If you jump ahead to the A30 sheets, please. Our hope is that you are able to look at these drawings now and see a coordinated building. We have a limited palette of plaster, stone, and terracotta roofs, and we hope that that now comes through as a little bit more coordinated of a design throughout not only the main house, but the accessory structures. We obviously have a little bit of eccentricity going on in a couple of our outbuildings that we want to celebrate, and then others are more reserved. But, you know, for the sake of architectural liveliness and being a part of this tradition of this great site up here as one of the Hilltop Barren properties, we would like to keep a little bit of diversity from building to building, but they're all speaking the same language. There were some concerns as to the height of some portions of the structure. Again, we've taken a lot of care to design this, not only under the guise of the existing hillside ridgeline rules in the ordinance and exceptions and all of that, but we've also tried to build on the project history. You remember that project that was under construction at the site that you saw some of the remnants of today? There was a little bit of a contentious 2-story element that was pushed really far south on that plan's design, and ever since the beginning of this, we've tried to locate our highest element farther away from that and with as few visual impacts as possible. We've also made sure that the living room, which was something in particular that was called out last time, has now switched to a hipped roof rather than a gable, and I feel as though that makes that less of a prominent feature, especially from that top elevation, number 2 on that sheet. Let's see, we've got a couple of comments about landscape, which I can hand off to Cheryl, but I just want to go back to the story pole items before we move on to the other disciplines. So when it comes to the story poles, we understand that that main tower element off the courtyard, which you can see in that bottom drawing there, we understand that out of context, it can feel on the taller side. We just want to reiterate that this elevation, the north elevation, is the only one that you really read it as though it's a tower. On other elevations, it's more of a campanile feature or a belvedere. If you could go to the next sheet, please. These in particular, and the sections also show But our intent with that was not to make it stick out like a sore thumb. It's more of a knuckle. It literally is only about 5.5 feet from the ridge of the living room to the top of that tower. So even within the other building elements, it's not protruding all that much. And we understand that there are visual concerns in at least some capacity. We want to work with the neighbors, especially to the south, to make sure that those are addressed. Some other things that were brought up, the generator, if you could go to sheet AS 1.5, please, which is towards the beginning, heading the right way. We understand that there is a certain, there should always be a concern about generator noise because nobody likes hearing those things, and we're well aware of the local ordinances and all of that. Just to get ahead of this conversation a little bit, since we've submitted for this submission, we've had conversations with the owners, and they would like to use a generator that is exactly half of the capacity of the one we have shown here. So instead of a 400 kilowatt, we're going for a 200 kilowatt, which helps us out with the noise factor, at least a little bit. And on top of that, we're well aware that if we need to get an acoustician on board to not only mitigate to the 65 level, but beyond that, we're absolutely willing to do so. We would like to keep this generator and the equipment for the water features and things like that in their relative positions across the site, because, for example, this generator is where the electrical service was established for, it's near where the electrical service was established for the project that was under construction. And our hope by keeping the proposed generator nearby to that service was that we would save the neighbors some more construction and trenching and all of that stuff, and cost for the owner. We're trying to keep to a minimum with practical utility decisions like this. Some other notes from the story pole visit that we would like to address. Along these lines, pool equipment noise, pumps and heaters and all of that, we have done our best to site all of those within walled equipment yards. If we need to consider seeing just how many of those we can actually put in enclosed spaces, we can look into that, assuming it doesn't bust our development areas by too much. And we're willing to work with an acoustician to address any concerns on any of the property lines. Other items, there were questions about the means and methods of disposal of the existing foundation that's there on the site where we need to excavate and get rid of it. Mike Goins, our civil engineer, is in the audience there, and he can touch on that a little bit. And I think a lot of the concerns that have been brought up in general are things that we really need to unpack with the builder once we select them, and we'll be sure to keep the neighbors in the loop on as many items as possible. Let's see. And yeah, it's our hope that the buildings that we've proposed and the site plan that we've proposed have really taken into consideration all of the neighbors around us. We're trying to create a building that is really building on this tradition of palimpsest or layers over time, since the structure is such a it's in such a coveted spot in Montecito, and at the same time, we're not trying to make it this large gaudy thing that you see from all over. We drove down Barker Pass to look at that example that you brought up last time, and we did a couple of donuts around the neighborhood to see if we can see those poles from anywhere, and we couldn't, so we were happy about that. And really, we just want to make sure, we just want to offer up to everyone who's listening that we want this to be as transparent as possible in terms of anything that needs to be addressed. So with that, I would like to hand it off to Cheryl Fields, who can, or Scott Schrader, who can talk about the landscape plan and specifically the south property line planting. There were some concerns about that. And our feedback from the last MBAR hearing was indicating that we should consider more subtropicals, which is a relevant conversation after this Lotus Land one. So I'd like to hand it off to them, and then we can go to civil and lighting.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Fields with Schrader Design. And in regards to the planting plan, plant selection, when we presented before, we weren't quite in depth into what plants we were going to use at that time. We've since, taken a really good look at the site. We've taken a really good look at the planting that is in the neighborhood and leading up to the property, as well as the site conditions, soil conditions, and tried to stay with as many low or medium low water use plants as possible. We have it's not a manicured look. It's much more natural, flowing, very rural look to, as opposed to the manicured urban or suburban kind of look. So we've kept it much more free flowing and eclectic, like the architecture. With regards to the property line and not obstructing views, we've chosen species of trees that are fairly low growing and slow and very easily to be trimmed or shaped. And from the site pictures from the neighbor's property to the mountain view, we won't be exceeding anything that's not already there in height. So we feel like we've kept, our word and our promise on that, to make sure that activity and buildings on the site will be screened, but the mountains will not.
And then Cheryl, can you indicate any of the subtropical species that you're proposing?
So subtropical is almost a point of view. And we didn't want to get into too many subtropicals because they're high water use. But what we've done instead is capture the feeling of them with shape and form. The Echium is in there, Ceanothus is in there. We have Ficus rubiginosa in trees, and the African coral tree, the Erythrina afra. So we've got more exotic looking plants. I don't know if I would categorize them as subtropical, just because of the water use issue, that we didn't want to get into too many high water plants. We do have a lot of bougainvillea throughout the site, climbing on structures and of all different colors. So it will be visually a very lively landscape palette, and kind of more geared to what the function is. We do have palms within the interior court. If I can annotate. We have palms throughout this area and this area, where we can control water much easier, and not have it, evaporate out or leak out into the landscape and cause too many hydrozone issues. Other plants that go with the feeling and structure of subtropicals without being subtropicals would include I'm just looking at the plant legend I can read. Sorry. The Madagascar jasmine, star jasmine. We do have roses in this area here. So as far as leaf shape, color, texture, and a variety of texture, capturing what those subtropicals would bring to the site was more the mandate rather than using high water plants.
Thanks, Cheryl. In order to get through the other two disciplines that we've got with us today, I'd like to introduce Mike Goins, who's there in person, and he can talk through quickly if you're able to jump to the civil set, please. I'd like for Mike just to explain our general drainage strategy here, because we are at the top of the hill, and I know there's a lot of concern about what happens when you're downslope from someone at the top of the hill. Mike can also speak to what's already been done at the site and what we're going to be keeping from that previous design. And I would also like for Mike to comment a little bit about caisson and foundation removal, where we need to remove it and where we think we can keep some things in situ. So once those drawings are loaded, Mike, you can take it away.
Thank you. Good afternoon. One thing good about being on top of the hill is we don't have any run-on from other neighbors, so we don't have to intercept water and concentrate it and have to redistribute it on the low side. So old school civil engineering tells us that we have to maintain the historic drainage patterns, that we can't increase and concentrate runoff onto the neighbors. And that, coupled with the new stormwater management program, means that we really are actually reducing the runoff that the site will see. The neighbors will see actually less water. But the site, as you know, has got a pretty flat with a knoll to the east and a slope to the south. And those are probably the two main concerns as far as neighbor protection, because there's not that much going to the north. There's a road to the north there that intercepts the water. But all of the proposed, I was by the way, the civil and structural on the previous project that got built that you see the remnants of. And when that guy called me and said he wanted to fill in the reservoir, I said, no, you can't do it. And he's, I hadn't even really met the guy yet. And I said, we're going to need that for stormwater management. And he goes, oh, okay. So we actually built a 55,000 gallon cistern within the existing reservoir. That reservoir is 50 by 100 feet in plan and 12 feet deep. The rest of it we used to reduce our site excavation quantities. So from a stormwater management standpoint, we have intercepted all of the roof and patios and have taken all that hard surface to the cistern. All of the roads or the driveways and the walkways are either self-treating or permeable. So since that time, we've also, as part of this project, added 2 more cisterns, one of 5,000 that is on the south side of the main house, sort of in the middle of the site. We didn't want to have to pump over to the reservoir, so the only thing we could really do there was put in another little cistern, and then we also have another cistern. If you could go to C 2.0, it would be helpful. At the east corner, this is a difficult plan to read. There's so much information on it, but in the lower right corner where the pool is, we added a 15,000 gallon underground cistern below the pavilion building, which is the one furthest to the east. And we've made provisions for all of that water is going to be used for landscape irrigation. And this is tier 4, so we had to actually collect water from the 2.4-inch storm. And if the cisterns overflow, we don't get that many 2.4-inch storms. Used old school, right? It seems to be changing now, but the county wanted us to empty the cisterns within 72 hours. We said, why? And we went back through the records to 1954 and found out that there were really only very isolated cases where there were ever back-to-back 2.4-inch storms. And we convinced them that that shouldn't be a requirement, and they dropped that requirement. So anyway, we want to take as much of the water. We're going to have a very sophisticated control system so that we can use the water for irrigation. In the event that the big cistern that's in the reservoir, it's already installed. It's got overflow provisions. It's got an outflow structure. So that one's taken care of. And then on the other two new ones that we're going to add, we're going to put, we're going to reduce any overflow into, get it back to sheet flow and low velocity, so that won't have any change in what the neighbors see is the point. We're going to redistribute the water along linear paths, so they won't see any more than they see right now. And there are a couple of natural sort of drainage courses on the south side and in the southeast corner. But we don't see ourselves really contributing much to that. So what else on civil?
The caisson removal and reuse potentially.
Yeah, so on the caisson removal, there's 278 of them. That's the way they were designed. I did the structural engineering on the previous project, which was similar to this in the sense that it had a significant size main house and several smaller buildings. So in a pool and a lot of patio that was all because of we've got expansive soil up there, clay, it's the worst stuff. And so everything really was on caissons. And now we're looking at what can we do with them? Can we reuse some? Can we bury some? Can we cut some off? Can we, what I would like to see happen is, and we're starting to analyze this, we're comparing the new foundation, which we're just getting into, we're really waiting to move down the road a little bit before we get too deep into the foundation design. But personally, I would like to see us reuse some of the caisson crushed concrete for road base and permeable pavement, if that's possible. I think that would lighten the load for hauling stuff off site. And you're probably saying, well, that sounds noisy, but I thought we're still kind of waiting for our construction management team to, they're looking at means and methods of how to make this happen. But personally, I think I've been on projects before where I had to install sound blankets, and I thought that one option would be to use the existing basement. I don't know if you guys went in that or not, but there is a large existing basement where we could haul caissons. There's also slabs and grade beams and retaining walls. So there's a lot of stuff that's got to be taken down. But if we could haul that into the large basement that's there, that's covered now, and kind of encase it with sound blankets if we could just, it's not cheap, but it's probably cheaper than hauling stuff out and then back in. We think that maybe we could haul stuff into the basement, crush it, and then reuse it on our driveways and stuff. So it's still something we're thinking seriously about. We just haven't gotten that far along with it. And hopefully a lot of them can be cut off below grade a few feet, and some of them are just going to have to be pulled out. We've even talked to the contractor that drilled all the holes, and he says, well, the way you do it is you excavate in front of the caissons. These are all about 15 feet deep, maybe 20. There's not too many that are deeper than that, but his idea is to excavate in front of the caisson and pull the caisson down and then put it on a truck and haul it away. And so that's a lot of truckloads itself, but I'm not sure what other ideas offhand. Andrew, am I forgetting any ideas that we had?
Yards
I think we
input
could-
and yards out.
Pardon me?
How many yards in and out as of today, please?
How many, on grading or caissons?
Project wide.
Oh, well, the grading quantities are on C 1.1, and they're about 4,600 of Yeah, I 5,025 cut and 858 fill. So that's an export of 4167. So 10-yard or 10-yard trucks is going to be a lot of trips. So, we're concerned about that and the condition of the road and just annoyance factor. So we want to do what's sensitive to the neighborhood. We didn't really, on the previous project, you can imagine, you saw the size of it based on what's there. We didn't get any that I know of complaints during construction from, a lot of deliveries and hauling off of things. So,
Hey, Mike, I think we want to pass it along to lighting just to
okay.
keep it
All
going
right.
too.
All right.
Thank you though. We're gonna have Michael Lombardi from the lighting team just comment on the lighting plans because this is the first time you all are seeing them. We didn't have them at the last presentation. I hope you got the colored keys plan that was sent over.
Yesterday.
David, can you switch to the colored ones that we sent yesterday?
They're in the box. I pulled them down this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing them in color. It helps.
Of course. Great. Thank you. And good afternoon, everyone. Michael Lombardi with Sean O'Connor Lighting. We are the lighting design consultant for this project. And as you are now aware, we have created some color-coded versions of the plans. These are exactly the same as the previous plans. There are no changes to the design between the two documents, just so you know. I know you have a lot of content to review today, so I'll start with explaining the overall lighting strategy and the tools we are using. And we're, of course, available for any more specific questions if those come up through the course of the meeting when you get to questions. In terms of the general lighting approach for the project, we are utilizing low-level sources with very little architectural or landscape lighting mounted higher than eye level. The exceptions would be some tree-mounted downlights at select locations and a few decorative pendants or flush mounts under architectural canopies. Otherwise, we're keeping everything at a very low level in terms of architectural and landscape lighting. Most of it is mounted at 18 inches or lower. One thing you will notice with the updated set of plans is the legend with the color coding will also give you some of the mounting heights of those fixtures as well. And I can go through that in a little bit more detail as we get through this. In terms of the overall lighting approach, we're also looking at using warm color temperature sources. So 2,700 Kelvin or even warmer. This will create a very quiet, understated, and romantic feel on site. Warmer color temperature is also better for our circadian rhythms and also for the natural habitat as well. So I think there's a lot of reasons to go this route. In addition to that, we are planning for a dimming system for all the exterior lighting, so we can again dial down the light levels to preserve that evening aesthetic. And that will give us additional flexibility on site so that we can even further reduce light levels. The idea is that we want to make sure that there's that dialogue with the landscape and the views, and you can see both out and inward. And so dimming will help with that. And I'm sure that the neighborhood will appreciate it as well. You'll also see in our design set that we're implementing creative ways to ensure full cutoff lighting without uplight. For example, where there's more traditional lantern type decorative wall sconces or pendants, we are developing a cutoff hat that will sit within the fixture to ensure that there's no uplight while maintaining a more traditional aesthetic. So we're trying to be very mindful of what the needs are and that we keep all of our light directed downward. I'd also like to just go through a brief sort of overarching detail of the typology of lighting on the site and what that means for what you're seeing here. And some of this relates to the color coding, which you can take a look at for more detail. Vehicular paths, we're looking at judicious use of downlight only at select trees. We're trying to keep that away from property lines. And it's really more a matter of what's necessary for safety. There is some wall-mounted lighting at structures or at thresholds and gates. That would be like an architectural wall sconce. We're keeping those at about eye level. Again, all downward light. From there, at pedestrian paths, mostly no lighting. There are some lighting elements at key junctures on the site. And so we're using like a small sort of post, keeping those again at a very low level, 10 inches or 18 inches, depending on the conditions, or lighting at steps, again, for safety. There are a few retaining type walls where we have a niche type detail where we've, again, located downlight within that pocket, and that's at steps or key safety points. In terms of landscape and planting beds, it's mostly ambient light, so we're not directly lighting those. There are a few, you'll see sort of a low level type landscape light that's used in just a few areas. That would be 8 inches to 15 inches in height, and it has sort of like a top hat or a mushroom hat that keeps the light downward again.
And Sean, Michael and Sean, I think we can jump into more specific detailed areas later. I don't mean to cut you off, but in the interest of everyone's time, I think that was a thorough enough intro. And again, just to close the loop on everything, I know we threw a lot at you today, though there are a lot of items under consideration, both from the county and the neighborhood, and we just want to make sure they're all addressed. So thank you for bearing with us. We really hope that we've garnered enough trust and support to advance to preliminary review upon discussion. And if there's anything else that you need from us to get there, we'd be more than happy to provide it. I did also forget to mention that we have Tim Hazeltine on the line in case anything comes up on the historical beat in terms of questioning. So thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. And I'm just going to pop in again real quickly to close. This is Shelby Jenke from SEPS Land Use Consulting. Thank you all so much for taking your time to come to the site this morning. That was really helpful. Hope it was helpful for you as you make your comments and questions. Just to reiterate where we're at in the process, we have submitted our land use permit application, which is currently in review with our planner, and we're awaiting her initial feedback letter still. We have approvals from Montecito Fire Department. They've reviewed the plan in depth and are happy with it as proposed. As you've seen, we have a lighting plan, photometrics will follow, and our team is aware of the requirements and typical concerns. And as Andrew stated, we're excited to show you the site today and the plans as they become more developed, and we're looking forward to hopefully hearing your comments, and our goal is for comments to come back for preliminary approval after the LUP application is complete with planning. Thank you.
Questions, Bill, please.
Yeah, Mike. So grading, right? That's a huge number there. Have you been able to, I know it's probably a very difficult task, to look at what the holes are already in the ground that you have, and you're going to be filling and recompacting maybe, and then making more holes for basements and stuff like that. Has that all been taken into consideration with these numbers, or are you just looking at, well, if this was a flat lot and we're digging out and this is the export?
As far as quantities go?
Yeah.
I haven't added all of the quantity of concrete to the earthwork quantities. We're not sure what we're going to do there. I mean, it'd probably be, I don't really have a good answer for that. We're still just trying to consider what to do.
Is there a way to get more of a balance on site? And like you're saying, we're pulling up concrete, we're grinding it into rock. Maybe that's in the areas of fill.
Yeah.
So maybe you're able to reduce some of the quantities of export and try to balance it a little better on site somehow.
The quantities that are on the plans right now are just earth moving, and most of it's generated from the subterranean aspects of the building.
All the basement areas, yeah.
All the basement areas, yeah. So I'm hoping
you have a lot of basement area there already.
There's Yeah.
So I mean, you already have holes in the ground in a way, and so I'm thinking maybe it's
Yeah.
not as bad as it seems.
Yeah, you can imagine the difficulty in trying to calculate I spent a lot of time.
Need like a model or something to
Yeah.
be able to
So,
overlap.
yeah, we definitely want to minimize the truck trips off the site. And, there were a lot of options talked about. We didn't want to raise the site, right?
Right, no,
And we didn't really want to get into any big retaining walls. I mean, theoretically could have went to the property lines and built 4 or 5, 6 foot retaining walls and then
yeah,
backfill them and lose a lot of soil. So even if there are truck trips, it's probably preferred over doing that to the site.
yeah,
So we're still, scratching our heads on that. It's a big item. And from a structural standpoint, because the new building's going to be on caissons. And so if the new building's on caissons and we've disturbed the site, removing all the other caissons, it's like, what does that leave me with?
yeah,
And I mean, I had an idea that we could maybe even leave the caissons in there and somehow, they're all skin friction. So I thought, well, maybe we can, maybe there's some other use for caissons, 15, 20 foot long. They all weigh about 5 tons, right?
yeah.
And I thought there might be a way that we could actually break the friction bond on the caissons, pull them out as a unit and then haul them to some site that may need them for. I also calculated that they probably would have all fit in the reservoir. But the reservoir is full now. So,
And a lot of this, we will obviously have many, many days of discussion with the builder that we end up going with, and
Can you treat
finding the
them
most
like,
efficient way forward.
and you treat them like boulders would be treated, like, oh, that's a boulder, we're gonna just tie into it, I don't know how or,
yeah.
yeah, it's not a boulder, but anyway, well, whatever you can do. And then, architectural question real quick on the, new floor plan, go to L 1.0, Dave, if you could. There's the garage has got kind of a wedge shape to it. It's the only thing that's got kind of that wedge shape. And I was kind of curious, is that a setback line there that you've got do you see that kind of sharp corner coming out there? Is there an architectural reason for that?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. That's one of the portions of the design that we're excited about in terms of honoring the historical legacy of the area and the Spanish colonial revival and hacienda languages, because if you can see from the yoga guest house tower up in that inner corner of the property lines, kind of in the upper left area, you can see there's a line that connects from there all the way down to the low southeastern corner of the generator yard.
Yeah.
That's a site wall that happens to be broken up with gates, and it turns into buildings at certain points. So we're really playing on this idea of, a lot of the Spanish historical architecture in the area was born out of practicality, right? And if you're building a site wall, what's more practical than to use one of those walls as a portion of your structure? And so we've tried to draw from that rich legacy of having certain structures and portions of structures sprout out of those site walls and turn into buildings.
So is that
And
an archive? Is that an archive piece then? That's actually a historic stone wall that you're kind of tying the angle off of, or are you creating this
No,
artificial?
we're creating that.
Okay, all right. Okay. And then a question about the drive there, just to understand it. Is that were you driving straight into that LA there? Is that a grass strip or something in the middle of the driveway? And is that just to understand it, that LA of trees, is that a turnaround there at the entry of the house? Is that how that works? I'm trying to, because then you have another driveway that comes around, which is like more of a service entrance to the garage. Am I understanding that correct?
Yes, I can let Cheryl talk about the grass strip, but in terms of the two different drives, to keep it as concise as possible, the southern one is our service, fire, and owner entrance. And then the upper one is more of a guest entrance. The fire department actually I mean, they could get in that courtyard if they wanted to, but that does not have a fire department turnaround because we've achieved the requirements with the
Can
service
you,
courtyard hammerhead.
and can you make with a car a turn in one swoop without having to do a point turn on that? If you're coming into the front door and you're going to drop somebody off at the front door, can you just make a curve and then go all the way back out without doing, is it wide
Yeah,
enough
we've
there?
really, that's why you see that one missing tree down in the southeast corner of that courtyard, and we've pushed the lower shrubs and things up to the corner so that you can achieve that.
And then the parking spaces there, the 4 cars, are those lights shining into anybody's neighbor yard that you know of? Is that pretty well screened?
Yes, they are screened.
Okay.
The lawn strip in the entry road is to help make it feel like you're coming onto, like you're driving up an old country road, that this has been here forever and there's remnants of, the prairie grass.
Got it. Okay.
That feel to it.
And then on E301, real quick, Dave, there's a chimney that you show there. It looks extra tall. I'm wondering, is that necessary by code? A31.
Let's take a look.
Should be near the end of that set, David.
301, sorry. A301. There you go. There's a chimney comes off of that, what looks like a scalloped roof, flat roofed area there. Chimney looks extra tall, like it's way beyond the 2, what in 10, does it need to be that tall? Or a draft, is that a fireplace on a upper deck or something?
Yes,
On
there's a
east
fireplace on the upper deck.
East elevation, kind of between the left and middle detail bubble.
Yeah, I see what you're talking about. We can make sure that that meets the 3210 rule and doesn't exceed it.
Yeah, okay. And then last question, plate heights on your tower. What's that upper floor plate height? Your floor to ceiling in there.
So it's about, let's see, I can't quite read it on that. So you're looking for the eve of the tower height?
Where the plate
More or
height
less?
is there. Yeah, the plate height of that second floor element.
Yeah.
And I guess generally the question would be, could that tower be lowered?
It's just about 24 feet from, yeah, it's in that zone. Depends where you're taking it from, but it's about 26 feet from the courtyard paving level.
To the plate?
Yes.
26, okay. And could that be lowered?
Potentially, but if you look at that 301, the drawing that we're on, you can see that one side of that tower is almost completely engaged with the roof of the living room.
Yeah,
And at some point it would start to, get eaten up by that volume. And we would like to still read that as a little bit of its own element.
Yeah,
So we can study it.
Make it a little higher so the roof line works better.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all
Understood.
right, that was it. That was it, thank you.
Robert, questions, please.
What is the plate height in the living room?
Plate height in the living room is 16'11".
So you could bring both the tower and the living room down, in my mind, a foot or two. But, this is just questions, so I guess that's more of a comment. But the other question I have is that you show on your landscape plan, I normally try to stay away from landscape, but this whole row of new landscaping along the south, What happens to all those big mounding bushes that are there right now? Whose property are they on? Where do they go? What happens to them? And my only other, well, I'll leave that there, but those big mounding, because they affect the view, obviously. And are they gonna stay? Are these, is this new south landscaping in lieu of that? I mean, that's my question.
I believe a lot of those plantings are on the properties to the south. Cheryl and Scott, do you have any further input on that?
Most of them are. So ours will be within our property line. These existing mounds, being on the neighbors, it would be up to them to make sure that they keep them at the height that they would want them at.
No more questions.
Dave, questions, please.
As far as the civil engineering, do you have a site section or something that can illustrate where that 5,000 cubic yards of
That's in the Civil 2 set.
I'm sorry, you can see all the diagonal hashed areas are the excavation for the basement. You don't see too much earthwork outside the building. So that's what I was referring to as far
so
as,
the majority of the cut is the result of the new basements? And what's the purpose of the new basements?
oh, there's a lot of facilities down there. Indoor pool, spa,
Theater.
Wellness center,
theater, mechanical space.
So the 5,000 right now is basically created by the basements. It's not including potential other earthwork due to the excavation of the foundations and all that.
Excavations for foundations are.
No, I mean the demo of the existing foundation.
Doesn't include that, no.
Okay, thank you.
Is that it, Dave? Rob, please. Questions?
Have you, so as far as the dirt goes, is there being proposed a lot of earth mounding as a option for trying to balance the cut and fill in the landscape? Is that part of the plan? I didn't necessarily see that.
We pretty much minimize the earthwork on the outside of the buildings.
Okay.
No, we didn't create mounds to lose soil.
Okay. Seems like there's an opportunity there. I don't know to what extent. On the entry drive, what would you say, and I don't know if this is to the landscape architects or the architects, what would you say if I said that I struggle with, I don't see a sense of hierarchy in the entry drive coming in? There seems that you come in, there's the driveway that comes out to the right, there's a lot happening. And do you feel like there's a clear distinction in terms of getting to the front door by the way the planting reads, by what's happening with maybe entry columns, whatever, things of that nature? I don't know if that's a question for the architects or a question for the landscape architects. But
Well, I can comment on
yeah.
two quick parts of that. The first is that this is very typical of the Hilltop Barren Estates in Montecito. I think including the old Eucalyptus Hill mansion that used to sit here, this bifurcation between service and not service, and they're actually even in similar areas. The original mansion that was there 100 years ago had a service court in that area. We've done our best to differentiate it with paving and that planter strip. And our hope is that when you enter the site, you basically have a sight line all the way through that entrance to the courtyard. So we're trying to create a sense of intrigue with the gates, the fountains in that northern auto court, the portal into the courtyard and beyond.
And actually to add to that thought, I see the axial layout of some of that, of the driveway coming in and into the courtyard. And then is there a reason why the pool area and those buildings are off axis and then not kind of in line with that axial point? I know the reality is when you're in the field, you won't sense that, but I see those things in plan view always become quite evident. So any reason why that you wouldn't maybe have that line up axial and have that center line kind of carry all the way through the pool and all the way to the very end, and as opposed to having it skewed the way it's shown now, the way folks ended up doing it?
Yeah, good question. There is a pivot point in the courtyard. You can tell outside of the inner ring of columns and colonnades and rooms, it actually skews after that point. We're trying to line up with the view to Rincon Mountain beyond, and we are also just trying to, in general, not create something that is a bunch of rectangular samey volumes that looks like it could be in the Hollywood Hills. We're trying to create something with a little bit of character, and I think these skews and irregularities and things like that are much more in line with the actual precedents that even Santa Barbara architects were looking to 100 years ago.
What to the landscape architects is the blue-gray tree at the entry and up by the pool, is that bay laurel, the native bay laurel with the bay leaves and all that? Is that what's being proposed there?
Blue-gray massive plantings, that's ancient olives.
What's that?
Olives.
Those are blue-gray, those are olives. You had bay laurel somewhere on there? Where were the bay laurels then that I saw?
The bay laurels are a little more toward the perimeter and along the walkway towards the pool on the bottom of the plan. And there's a few more on the road on the other side of the reservoir.
Okay. Are you familiar with that tree? They kind of grow like bamboo where they kind of get going and their root systems can be pretty substantial and pretty problematic down the road. Or just letting you know if you and the same question with the date palm. I see where we see Phoenix dactylifera. I've seen more landscape architects try to plant that palm lately, and I can point to examples that it likes the heat of the desert and it's not very successful in Santa Barbara. And as you get near the coast, I've seen some right on UCSB, and there's some in other places where they look horrendous. But have you seen somewhere where they've been successful as you move? I mean, perhaps as you move up into Montecito and the hills where it's definitely a little hotter, that maybe they'll work up there. But are you familiar with they're a little tentative kind of,
yeah,
up here?
Where we have them planted, they're within a microclimate. So they're all interior to the courtyard. And just below that inner main courtyard, it's another courtyard. So, and we have on the outside of that, we've got the coral trees. So we've got them protected so that the effects of the ocean won't be as harsh as if they were out in the landscape themselves. And that's why we chose, those to be, because we can control the microclimate within those areas.
I mean, I got my fingers crossed because I love that palm. And I've just seen where it's been highly unsuccessful near the coast. And so maybe as you get up where you are maybe it'll work. So I'll be anxious to see because you're not the only one who's done that in the past few years. So anyways, those are my questions for now. Thank you.
Questions, please.
So, yes, I have a question about the quantity of the grading of the cut. So if you, just a question, if you remove all the basement, how much is saving?
%70. You removed all of the basement that's proposed?
Yes, because I know that the site has gone through this board many times and you are coming in with a half built or quarter built project from the previous design team. And now you guys coming in with a new design for the new house of, about 5,700 square feet on paper, but the basement is almost as big as the main house. And the question had to do with, one of the things we try to do with the guideline, try to minimize the amount of development on the project. And either you're going up or you're going down. That's the effect of, if you're going up, people see it. You're going down, you just truck out almost, 6,000 cubic yard of dirt. And that's one of the consideration that we have to decide on if this is too much for the site. Because either way, it's will have some damage to the environment on how you do things. And my question is, yeah, if you minimize it, obviously you don't need the grading or minimize it quite a bit. It's a true statement.
What's your question?
So the true statement, if you cut out the basement, you can pretty much eliminate all the export.
Not all. I said 70%.
All right, thank you.
And the further information we get from builders about using it as road base and things like that will help shine some more light on that.
You done, Tip?
And then, when you did the calculation of, I see that, I assume this is very accurate, the 5,025 cubic yards. Does that amount include the over excavation for the basement?
Yes.
Like how many feet over excavation?
You mean over excavation like recompaction?
Yeah.
Well, this soil is not going to be recompacted. It's expansive soil, so we're actually not doing any recompaction. We're putting down cardboard forms to isolate the foundation from the soil. So we're not going deeper just to recompact. There's none of the building slabs or floors are setting on soil. They're actually elevated above the soil.
And Stacy, please, questions.
Just one thing on the grading, Mike, if you, to utilize all of the caissons and stuff as road base, wouldn't you still have to export the soils as you're replacing it with the road base? And it would still be the same export?
Yes.
Even in that situation?
But less import of gravel and less cost of gravel.
Okay.
Gravel now is a premium. Everybody's doing permeable pavement, and if you looked at gravel prices, it's like, wow. So
I do. Yeah, I agree. But just from an export-import situation, you're still exporting the soils in order to keep and
yes,
degrade and keep that on site, but it is a cost savings, but not necessarily an export savings in terms of truckloads.
right.
My questions, going back to landscape, to Cheryl, so when we originally saw the architecture, they really explained conceptually really well that it was kind of the concept was, different iterations through time, but kind of having a cohesive setting. And they came in with a strong concept. Can you explain more the concept of the landscape and how it relates to that architectural concept?
Yes.
And walk us through the trees, because the plan is really hard to read in terms of the species and your legends.
If we could go to the next page where so here we've when you enter into the site, it is an old olive grove. And the understory is lavender, primarily, as well as some carex grass. And the rows are not, it's meant to look like an old olive orchard, which is part of this area's heritage. And the rows aren't straight, so that over time, as earth moves and shifts, and people, when they first planted, may not have had things so straight, or something has died and another one got replaced, the rows start ending up being a little more off kilter, and that over time those rows wouldn't be as manicured and precise and pristine anymore. That it's meant to make this look like it was all done by hand rather than by ruler. When we have the paths that go through, you can go anywhere from parking cars back up to the main house, driving in, dropping off, and then coming back around. You're meant to always kind of look like you're going through this old olive grove that that is part of the history of the house. And the intent is that we would be getting, 100 and 120-year-old trees. So they're all, the character of them will be natural and gnarly and old, and each one has their own character to it. If we go to the next page, the center of the motor court here is in-ground fountains that will have lilies in, that is picking up on the reservoir down below. And again, with the lavender, the trees that we have in here, just, sorry, I'm just making sure I'm speaking correctly on this. We've got Quercus virginiana, which is a little more manicured, but still that, this is part of the existing natural landscape. So that the canopies of these will be able to, frame views through to the mountains, as well as give a sense of enclosure that you've arrived at this old historic home. That's why we didn't use a more manicured looking tree. We've gone to something that was much more native and natural through here. The understory with this plan, we have, and here's where we get into our shapes and forms of the subtropical. Underneath, we're showing formium. So we've got this old natural and native canopy with some uprights that give like this splash and spark of color, and in the bronzes, and dark greens and olive greens that can occur underneath. If we go to through the courtyard to the motor court, the private motor court, we start introducing the coral trees, which have this, again, it's an old, the form of them it's very horizontal, and at times when they are deciduous, the form of the tree, again, it evokes this character of something that's been here forever and that we've built around it. The next page.
Would you like us to keep going, or is that enough information?
I mean, you can go maybe a little faster through it. Just going through each area, like, because I couldn't read that that was an erythrina, the coral tree. And what is the perimeter? Is it a Metrosideros?
It is.
It is, okay. And those get really large over time.
Not really, not really. They are slower growing and columnar. So it kind of acts like a hedge without being hedge material, and that, again, that formality of hedge, and with that little tiny pops of color with the red. And it's really easy to manage them, to keep them, as low as we want. This one, we can also see that the microclimates that we're talking about for the palms. And I was reminded that Cher's old house on PCH has some beautiful palms out on the coast, and they're doing quite well. And the next one down, next sheet.
So all those greens there are all erythrina?
Yes.
The bright green?
Yep.
Okay. And naked coral, or are you going with?
Naked corals.
Okay. I think she's just going to the next one. One question I have, Cheryl, too, all the underplantings, because you show all that Carex divolsa, like 10 feet on center. Is that the intention, to have one grass every 10 feet? Or is it to have it more blanketed in solid green?
It's
hard to read it conceptually.
Yeah, it's a little more blanketed, and they're more like 5 feet on center.
Carex
Yeah.
divolsa, 5 feet on center?
Yeah, that would be the widest spacing. But the idea is that it would look like a meadow grass.
So you don't want it to come together then? Because my experience with Carex divolsa, it's about 30 inches.
We could go denser with it.
Okay, yeah, because I see the understories. I'm just curious, I think what's happening is it's hard to read this plan from a concept standpoint, because I think there's just so much information on it that it's just difficult to parse down and really have, I think, your concepts come through more clearly. Like, I just think that graphically, it just needed to be reduced in such a way that, and maybe more imagery would help us, just so we could kind of see inspirations for each area. That's, yeah, just a note as I try to just read through it and get through all of it. That's all.
Yep.
That's all my questions, though.
Okay.
We go to the architect's site plan, and I'm looking for a roof plan, actually. A plan view, David.
Should be AS 1.2.
Right there. Garage. I don't believe that western side. I don't think you guys can build it that way. So I think the western side is going to have a slope. And the reason I bring it up is, number one, I think you're going to have to get it straightened out. But number two, it seems like a remarkably good place to put the generator to square up that roof element. And I would like to ask, would that be possible? The question is, would that be possible to get the generator up at the west end of the garage, please?
I think we would really prefer not to have the generator be the first thing that you see when you drive into the property.
Well, you're going to see the end of a garage. Why can't you see the end of a wall that happens to have a generator behind it? Please.
We're telling more of a story that this was more of an agrarian site wall that developed into these outbuildings over time. And we would prefer not to have that narrative broken down by, a fairly large generator. In addition to, noise being on the very interior of the property for the residents.
Kathleen, are you online with us, please? Ethelene Volpe? Okay, very good. Thank you. Public comment. Anybody? How many, please?
No requests.
Really? Okay, interesting. Okay, we are on for concept today. Let's see where everybody's coming at with that, please. Bill, and where should we go next with this project after today? Bill, comments, please.
Yeah, so, generally I like the architectural style. I think the details will be important once you get to that point. I like the idea that it's kind of an archive building that you're sort of building onto, so I like the theme there. Of course, you have the historical elements, and I appreciate you keeping those. If there was any way you could drop the tower in the living room roof just a little foot or two, see what you can do. I'm not going to hold you to it if it really is just not working for the rest of the building. It seems like it might be a little tall in the living area there, and maybe that'd be okay. I would be, I just want to make sure those car lights too, that you come in off that guest, don't shine into your neighbor. Maybe the guest parking could be in the grove facing toward your property, not in to the neighbor's side, if that makes sense. Flip it to the other side of the road. And then the biggest issue is the grading. I know that's the toughest part. We know it's how do you reduce the quantities of truck traffic off the property? Can you grind, like you said, that material on site? Can you reuse it to compact? Maybe you're not moving as much earthwork because you already have a lot of holes dug already. And I know you can't, it's not easy to calculate that. So I don't know where to go with that, but I know you're smart enough, you'll figure something out. So maybe make that further along, take that further along. Check the tall chimney, see if that's needed to be that tall, seems excessive. Other than that, I'm okay with everything else. I'm gonna leave the landscape to the professional landscape architects here. What were they asking for, preliminary and
No, they've
final?
got concept today.
Oh, concept, okay. I could see giving it concept,
Where should it go next, please?
full board, final, I think, huh? Yeah, no,
Okay.
I
Well, we haven't
preliminary,
even.
final, yeah.
Okay.
Preliminary, final, full board.
Okay, that's, okay, very good. Anything else?
No.
Okay, Robert? There is no motion if you want to get out of here.
There's a lot to absorb. This is a very ambitious project. I'm concerned about the grading. Cowles Road is going to be destroyed. I don't know who's going to repave it, but something tells me it's going to be you guys because that dirt up there is horrible. This is a strange comment, but if you were to take the tower and the living room down like 2 feet, you got an 18-foot plate in the living room. That's gargantuan. How about 16? Then maybe you could put a foot of dirt on the site with a low rock retaining wall and get rid of a lot of dirt right there on site. It's just a personal suggestion, but with that much area, 1 foot over all that, you'd be surprised how much you could get rid of. And I've been on that site before those bushes grew up. You had ocean views even through there. So, it might help with the views, but, in general, I like the project. I think it's very well done. And, I'm not sure if it's ready for prelim final. I'd kind of like to see it just for prelim again. Anyway, that's my comment.
Dave, comments, please.
Well, it was very helpful to go to the site today and see the story poles, and I'm very comfortable with what I saw there. And I think in general, the architecture and the landscape are very thoughtfully and sensitively designed, both for the site and the neighbors, and just the style of the architecture and the concepts that have been um, discussed today. I like the project. The one big caveat where you aren't being sensitive is the grading. And so I really need a lot more justification for the grading than what you've provided here. And I would strongly recommend that you find ways to balance on site, be creative about it. There's some of the ideas that Robert just mentioned. That's just a significant amount of grading. And so I have a hard time supporting that without some real concrete justification. But again, I like the project. I think there's so many things that are working. That's probably the one issue that I have at this point. And for those reasons, I would only want to see it come back to preliminary to the full board till that issue is resolved. But as far as the landscape, and I like, same thing with the lighting, I thought the concepts for the lighting were well in line with what we look for. So overall, I think it's a very nice project with the exception of the grading.
Who's ever taking minutes? Bill Wolf left the meeting at 3:08. Rob, comments, please.
I think the comments Dave and Robert just made frame it fairly nicely. There's a lot of things I really like about this project. There's some things that I'm not crazy about, but then I'm trying to get out of the way of you folks wanting to be kind of make it your own and have it your own style. I find things like where, the pool doesn't line up and some of those traditional aspects where it's off kilter. I think those kind of traditional concepts are important, and sometimes that ends up what you're trying to do ends up feeling like maybe bad construction, so that sometimes it's not successful from that standpoint. But what I do like, okay, so the views from the neighbors. I actually looked, I don't think there's any impact from the one neighbor we looked at. It's minimal. You can see the tower, you can see part of the pool area. And actually, Stacy and I were talking and thought that actually added, like seeing the tower. And yes, it could come down, but I thought it kind of added some character to the neighbor's view. So as some members have said before, we're under no obligation to make the neighbors in new construction completely disappear. So I think sometimes seeing something like the tower becomes part of something, part of the environment and the view shed that actually enhances it. So, so that was a good thing. Let's see, I really like I like the theme of the old olive grove, coming in. And so what I like with the landscape is the tree canopy has a lot of structure to it. But what I really don't like is I think the understory completely lacks structure. And this ties into, I'm the one that kind of pushed the subtropical theme. And even if you look at like Lockwood DeForest designs, I mean, he has very native plant palettes, very drought tolerant plant palettes, but he has a lot of structure to his understory. And I don't see any structure whatsoever to the understory. I mean, generally, understory planting and subtropical stuff, it wants to be higher water use near the house. And then you use the understory to kind of mimic the architecture and the hardscape forms in and around the house. And then as you drift away from the house and into where you start getting more natural, that's when you can loosen up. But it's kind of right now it's loose all over. So I would really encourage you to kind of maybe, tighten up the understory. And then I think there's a lot of great things about this project. So you're on to something as far as that goes. What else? I think That pretty much covers my thoughts for the moment. I think I caught them all, but overall, I support your project but I would like to see it again. I think there's some things that can be tightened up, and I think it has the potential to be a great project, but I don't think it's quite there yet.
Yep.
So, I'm sure that by the time the project is built, it will be very beautiful. I have no doubt about it. With landscaping and the architectural style, and even though I do have some concerns about the architectural style, we'll talk about that. However, I mean, the proposal as the way you have it now, I definitely cannot support it and cannot. And the big thing on my mind, but many, the most important had to do with the amount of grading. And I'm just looking at the project with over 5,000 cubic yard cut, and the amount of truck traffic, you drag it out from Cowles Road all the way to Sycamore Canyon, all the way down to 101 freeway, either go south or go north. Either way you go, it will be such a profound effect to so many people, to our local roads, and just for one house. And for that, we had approved project like that in the past, and every time we did, we heard from the community about, well, what happened to all the truck traffic back and forth. So because of that, myself living in Montecito for 40 years now, I just want to hear about this project from the public. That what did we approve, and why do we allow this to go through? And because of that, I feel that the basement had to be significantly cut back to a more manageable amount of export to the project, just because of the location of the project. So that's one of the big issues. David, can you go to the rendering of the elevation? Maybe the first page, the beautiful rendering.
Page number 1.
Yeah, so personally, I think this is a very beautiful, it's a rendering, but I know it's and I really like the style. I like what you're trying to do here, and to make the building nice and quiet, and a lot of plaster and small windows, and it's very charming, I must admit. But then, if David, you can go to the elevations on sheet, keep going down halfway. That's it, yeah. But when, we're looking at this, it seems like it's two different projects. This is the building that obviously you guys try to put in as many openings as possible to maximize the views. And because of that, the columns are skinny, there's not enough plaster in the building. And it just, I just, in a way, I can see that they're related, but and when you walk around the building, it's not like you look at the beautiful courthouse on Anacapa Street and you look at, on all elevation, they look beautifully on all elevations. So I really have a problem of how, how the building evolved from the front to the side to the back. And I think they need to be a little more unified in terms of the design style that you are going after, which I like the direction of the front. And then, I know that you had to make the tower a little smaller, because of probably too tall anyway. And then, your tower is kind of buried into the roof of the living room. That's, and again, I personally, I think it killed the definition of the tower. And if not a tower, I'm not sure what you call that, when it's almost the same height as the living room roof. So that is some proportion which I think you can work on to make it a little better looking building. And one of the last issues I I'm struggling with is that I know that you keep mentioning that you want the project to seem like it's being built through time. And it's almost like you try to create history without history. There's nothing here that for you, personally to embrace that concept because the buildings are all gone, there's nothing left. And because of that, the building is low, but the form is low art. And as John mentioned, the garage, I'm not sure how you build the garage with the sloping, with an angle like that, with the slope roof.
Hip roof.
The hip roof. I'm not sure how would it look because when I look at that, I think that one end, the garage will be lower than the other end, but maybe you have a way to really kill the roof, you make it work. So things like that, I think you try too hard to bring some historical aspect into something that there's nothing left. So might as well make it, go with a certain historical style you like, make it work, make sure that the main house is a little more unified from all the elevations. If you do a tower, make sure the tower reads like a tower. And I think that you'll be more successful that way than try to copy something. And so because of that, as of now, if it come back for preliminary as designed, I wouldn't support it. Thank you.
Stacy, comments, please.
I think enough has been said about the architecture, so I'm just going to focus on the landscape. I think it was very helpful to hear the concept and how it ties in to the concept of the architecture. I'm generally in support of it. I agree with Rob about the understory, that it needs more work. It needs, I think, too, more simplification. Right now, it comes out as kind of busy and not very thought through and a lot of high maintenance when I know that's probably not what you're trying to go for. And then the tree canopy, I think you could reduce it by like 15 to 20% because it seems very heavy for this entire site to have this much tree canopy and no breathing space to it. I'm also concerned with how many fruit trees you're putting on the property as well, that you're just thinking about that. Because this comes up all the time here in Montecito is we want all these fruit trees, but really who's picking the fruit and who's eating it? Kind of have to have an idea of what's going to happen with that because unpicked fruit becomes another kind of pest problem later in Montecito. Not quite sure about the Metrocederos in terms of being columnar. They've always have been large trees eventually here, but yes, they do grow very slowly. I'm not sure if you need to mask them though, against that whole south side, but rather let some of the natural other landscapes come through and kind of meld into your adjacent landscapes too. It doesn't have to be this and that. I feel like when you have a large 4-acre site, that having these blended zones along the edges with your neighbors where they have natural as well, that it comes together better. And then too, I think in terms of like the subtropicals and how you're trying to use them, I get that. I think what Rob is saying too, it's less like, I don't want to call it the use of subtropicals, but rather implore you to use more fantastical. This house has such an interesting architectural form and all of these layers to it. And you're in Montecito where we have Lotus Land and you can go down there and just see I think you can expand the palette a bit around the structures, especially. And conceptually, I think it would work to have even more fantastical plantings brought in, like aloe trees and other things that haven't really been considered but look great in our region. And also, I still think feed your concept really well. But overall, I am generally supportive of the overall concept on the landscape.
I know I'm going to sound like a broken record, but something needs to happen with that generator with noise, next to zero noise over the property line, please. Mike Lighting, the interior designer to pick this and that, that, there's two requirements. Pointing down, but also no light pointing out, commonly called glare. Your diagram does not do that. Normally, the lights are up in the fixture. The lighting element is up in the hood. You might want to take a look at that. I also, Mike, of course, grading, my heart goes out to, you know, people say I'm not a nice guy. But okay, so Shelby and Mike, I do not believe this is not going to be controlled by a hillside ridge line. Please have that verified, 16 feet, you know, where exactly, how exactly that 16 feet is calculated from what point. But when I was out there, both the eastern side and the southern boundary, and then we drove on that driveway. So please verify that and make sure. It obviously has extremely important effects on this, okay?
Make a
Yeah?
may respond. I think I did talk to Andrew and we looked into that and it has been designed per the hillside ridge line.
Okay,
As
very
is.
good. Just if that could also somehow get documented on the page, just like we have an FAR.
Sure.
Whatever that calculation is, I haven't done it for so long, I can't remember if it's done from property line or from building edge or whatever, okay? Andrew, this board, and I strongly suspect your client, would be greatly appreciative of 3D models to show what the heck is going on with this building. I think that that would answer Tip's question about it seems to change as we go around and it doesn't seem to be a consistent whatever. And I don't know that you have to get involved with all of the planting, you know, which can run a rendering cost through the roof. But I think the basic massing and fenestration of the building is critically important to see. And I don't think, and I think, do you have any yet that you've been working with internally?
We
Andrew?
have a variety of hand illustrations that were done over models.
Okay. We had, over the years, there have been more and more models of 3D computer generated models. We find them extremely helpful. So now I know this plan is not ready for final even next time. I have some questions about concept, even with some of this fenestration and stuff. So for my vote, I would want to see it go no further than preliminary next time. Do other people agree with that? At the full board, and we'll see it. And Andrew, my sense is that those 3D models are going to be extremely important to getting your approval. Okay? So anybody else? Oh, and one last comment. Cheryl, the perimeter landscape, have you been on the site? Cheryl?
Yes, I have.
Okay. My sense is that a significant portion of the perimeter landscaping is already done for you. And I would suggest and encourage you to go back because I don't think you need to do as much as you're showing. And I think that the views from your property out are going to be taken out by what you're proposing, which would obviously be a very unfortunate thing. So I'd encourage you to go back up and take a look. Anything else before we go to the next item, please? Thank you all. Okay, item number 3.
Thank you so much.
Marker. We're going to take 5 minutes really quick. Shelby, please. We are back. Mark, are you with us, please? Or somebody else?
Good afternoon.
Hi there.
Hi, I'm Melissa Turner from Design Arc. And with me, we have Mark Shields from Design Arc, and I'll introduce the rest of our team briefly, and then we'll jump right in. Scott Capps, landscape architect from EPT. We've got our civil engineer, Vanessa, and our lovely clients, Amy and Mark Frank. Hey, guys. Thank you so much for having us today. We're really excited about getting our preliminary and final approval. Just to give you a little bit of background, we were with you almost a year ago and made a lot of progress working with our clients and getting through Ennisbrook design review as well recently. And we just recently submitted our drawings to the building department ahead of this meeting, just by a week or so. And we're happy to kind of run through the drawings and show you some of the architectural detailing since the last time you've seen the project. With that,
Melissa.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to report to the board that our resident detail guru, though he's not with us, reported to me, and I concur, that the details are fine with this project. So if you have made changes to the building, like added a room or raised or lowered a roof, could you bring that up to us? But I think the details we pretty much got covered, and my guess is that the landscape people would like to take a good look at it. So just trying to be as efficient as we can. Melissa?
Of course. Well, with that said, not much has changed on the footprint of the building. We had a little bit of push and pull in the living room area, but we're within a couple hundred square feet of where we were last time, so really minor. As far as site planning goes, if you can go to sheet A 1.0, it's page 9 of the PDF. Just really minor site plan revisions. We received our fire department approval for the driveway configuration and the motor court and entry court. We had reduced the lawn area in the backyard and some tree changes, which I'll let Scott talk to. That's pretty much it. We can jump to the elevations real quick. I don't think a whole lot has changed, but Mark Shields can talk to it a little bit more on the design and aesthetic.
John, I think if you guys were fine with the elevations last time and you're happy with the details, we can maybe jump to landscape if that's okay with the board, just to save time.
I think that's good, Mark. Thank you.
Okay, then you can go to page 78, I believe, to the start of landscape. And I'll turn it over to Scott then.
And as we're flipping towards the landscape sheets, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Scott Capps with EPT Design, the landscape architect. Similar to the architecture, not a lot has changed in terms of overall site design. We've only just refined our drawings, added quite a bit more detail to our planting design, showing more specific sizes, quantities, etc. We've refined our irrigation water use and have gotten approval from the Montecito Water District with landscape water use. And as Melissa noted, have also adjusted some tree locations, which I can speak to. So looking at our existing conditions here, our tree disposition plan, there are 6 beautiful existing olives along Meadowbrook Drive. Certainly going to retain those. And as we get into the planting plan, you'll see that we're actually adding to those and complementing those. We can skip ahead. Is this? Yeah, I guess we can just focus mainly on irrigation and planting, if that's okay. I think these are the up-to-date drawings. I did just want to highlight, and we skipped over, David, the irrigation plan and water use calcs, that we really worked with Montecito Water District to bring our water use down. And a big change back in the rear of the garden is going from a typical high water use lawn. We're now proposing a low water use turf alternative, so Agrostis palens, which can be maintained for family gathering, recreation use. So our client is on board with that. We've also adjusted some plant selections to really get our plant palette down to majority of low to low water use plants. I think it's something like 97-98% of our palette is considered low to low water use. So really refining the planting design to ensure our irrigation design is meeting local standards. I think the focus today, if we want to jump ahead a couple of sheets to the graphic planting plan. Yeah, this is great. We can focus on this. I'll just kind of talk through high level what our landscape concept is. Again, it really hasn't changed from the last round. We've only just gotten more detail in. You know, overall, as I mentioned in the front of the garden, so on plan right, we're really playing off of those 6 existing olives. We're adding in new olive trees that kind of jump across this proposed low stone wall we're showing. The front of the garden is more ornamental in nature, still very naturalistic in terms of massings and organization, but in terms of plant selection, it's a classic Mediterranean palette we see around here. And as the site is very vacant, as you guys know, we really wanted to anchor the home within the landscape. And so we're doing that by proposing some very large coast live oaks. Those are the kind of, you know, oaky green color you're seeing. So we have two large oaks out in front that flank the entry drive and that entry motor court. And again, really anchor the architecture into the site. As we get to the rear of the site, this is where the plantings become more naturalistic. So really kind of taking inspiration from that great mountain view we have to the north. Similar to the front, just very thoughtful massings, layers of planting back here, but a little bit more naturalistic in a combination of native grasses, flowering perennials, and some succulent accents. There is just to the essentially like northwest of the pool, kind of that gray green zone. I wanted to highlight the owners were very interested in this idea of a cactus garden. This is also going to kind of come like a experimental garden for their 2 curious boys, which is super cool to kind of have fun back there. And we really like that balance of the gray green cactus to the more formal olive trees, the 4 trees to the east of the pool there, forming that space. I think that the biggest thing we want to talk through with everybody today is how we've treated the edges of our property. We're very sensitive in this project to our neighbors that surround us, both to the north and to the south. And looking at our neighbors to the north, you know, we knew we wanted to get some screening back there to block the little bit of roof line we see from our property. So we are proposing some what I would call smaller growing trees, such as olives and strawberry trees. Those are the kind of lighter green and almost pink purple symbol you're seeing along that north property line. Again, we wanted to ensure we're not blocking that mountain view, as well as not casting too much shade down onto the rear garden of our neighbors back there. And then similarly on the south, we're very cognizant of our neighbors' view from their property to those mountains, and we really wanted to respect that. So our clients are on today, and they've been fantastic in really having a number of productive conversations with this neighbor, and really just working with her and with us as the design team to address her concerns related to that view. And so really focusing on what we've done to mitigate those concerns. You can see along that south property line that it's pretty open in terms of trees. We've really pushed the taller trees on the coast live oaks, those larger green symbols, as well as some holly oaks, which get much taller. We push those to the corners of the property and a little tighter to the architecture, really to preserve that view window from the neighbor's property. The one exception is that orange tree symbol there, kind of in the middle, just south of the lawn. And this has been a constant design element that we as a design team and clients have really wanted to retain to kind of really anchor the lawn back there and give some balance to the pool terrace and the shade structure north of the lawn, and as well as provide a bit of shade to that seating area adjacent to it. What we're proposing here is we've always thought we wanted this fantastic sculptural taller coast live oak. But in discussion with the neighbor, our client, and the design team, we've really settled on more of a lower growing, more sculptural spreading coast live oak. So I think maybe we can flip to the next sheet and we can really see what we're going here. the image there on the bottom, this is from a visit to Jimenez Nursery down in Carpinteria a couple weeks ago. So that is a coast live oak, and this is what we would be proposing here. So something much more low branching and more sprawling rather than upright. We are noting this, that it would be maintained to about 15 to 20 feet tall. And again, really, that's just out of respect of the discussions we've had with the neighbor. This is the only tree along that south edge that would kind of fall within that view window that we see in that smaller plan up there in the left-hand corner of the page. But again, you can see on section B, that bottom section to the left, that's that northern property line where we're proposing, olives and arbutus, which would stay a bit shorter. And then any of our layered screen planting, if we can go back to the plant list if we want with questions, proposing things like our native ceanothus, native lemonade berry, ribes, things that will grow more into the 10 to 15 foot range, but still give us that privacy and screening we're looking for. I think we reviewed site lighting in the last meeting, but if we want to touch on that.
Can we do it again,
Yeah,
please?
absolutely. So the next sheet, one more. So very minimal in terms of site lighting. Really, it's kind of path lighting from a couple key entryways out to some spaces. We are proposing some downlighting from those specimen oak trees I noted in front. That's that triangle symbol B. I know we've had some comments back, which we do show some information in the drawings and a cut sheet. Those lightings would be those would have a glare shield on them. There's also an option to adjust the light spread in the field. So we would be working with the team and the lighting designer to ensure that, we're not having any unobstructed beams of light going off to neighboring properties. Again, just wanted to keep things very minimal in response to the very peaceful neighborhood we're set within. So very minimal approach.
Are you guys done, please?
Yes.
Questions, Tip, please. No questions. Rob, questions, please.
Scott, what are the soils like there? Are they a lot of clay or are they rocky?
I think it might be a mix, Rob, but I would have to confirm that. In our planting notes, we are very specific in terms of the agrarian soils tests we require from our contractor. And then that will certainly inform the type of soil amendments we put back in when we go into planting design. And we typically have those soil tests done after rough grading. A lot of this site is going to get mixed up during construction. So we like to have rough grading done. And then we get those soil tests done. And again, that informs the amendments that we like to bring in.
So what would you say to the notion that you have a lot of natives on the understory? What would you say to the notion that the natives prefer being kind of up in the foothills where they're rocky, the soils are more rocky, that as you go down towards the coast, that their success rate is greatly reduced because of the clay soils? They don't have the same lifespan.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And one thing, if you look at our plant list in the back there where we're getting a little bit more naturalistic, it is a mix of like some large swaths of carex, some large swaths of deer grass. I think those will certainly handle site conditions. We do have some 2 to 3 to 4 foot tall berms in the back. My experience, Rob, as you're pointing out, things like ceanothus, which we have some of the native sages, they like to be more on the slopes like you would find in the foothills, they get that natural drainage. So I think in the rear of the property, the plantings will be successful, but certainly we can review that.
So, and I mean, your plans are excellent. So let me state that, without being in the comment stage. So then my other question is then what would you say about a family with young kids and young boys running around and then on agrostis as a lawn for playing, which I question how successful that will be, and then having a cactus garden. So what would you say about that and the kind of compatibility of children with cactus gardens and lawns that really don't tend to be successful?
Yeah, I'll speak to the cactus garden first. You can see our clients kind of chuckling there, and I've been fortunate enough to meet their boys. They've sat in on some presentations, and they're curious youngsters, and I would attribute this garden to them. So if the concern, Rob, is more the spiky plant material, I'd kind of wipe that away on this project. Their boys are used to that. They're the ones kind of transplanting agave aloe cuttings and bringing them in. So this was really their space. You can see in that zone that the planting's a little sparse. Again, that's kind of let to allow them to run through there. We're thinking about some boulders for kind of, some natural play and stuff, but I don't think the spiky nature of the cactus garden is too much of a concern here with this family, but definitely hear your point. In terms of the Agrostis palens, we're fortunate to have S&S Seeds down in Carpinteria. They have, you can get this in sod. I did work a number of years ago down in Carp. There's the Friends of the Library building, if anybody's familiar with that, where the farmer's market cart is. There's a small, I'll use air quotes, lawn of Agrostis palens down there that was probably installed 15 years ago. They let it go wild, the more natural look. We've talked through this with our clients. I think there might be periods where we let that happen, but the intent is really to maintain it for kicking a soccer ball around, running around. And so, through my research and talking with the folks at S&S Seeds, we will be able to maintain it. I think we all know there might need to be some replacement over time just due to wear and tear, but it certainly seems to fit the look and feel with the other surrounding more naturalistic plant palette.
Okay, thank you. I will say that if you end up going to sod and marathon sod or something, I think you're set up with your wheelo so that that will work from that standpoint. If you end up in the Agrostis isn't successful, you could go to sod, and I think it would be fine with wheelo. So,
Robert, questions, please.
No questions.
Stacy, questions.
No questions.
Dave, questions.
No questions.
I have, okay, so lighting plan, please. You have 2 trees downlit between the house and the street, which on a daily basis, let's say in the evening, doesn't it make more sense to actually have those lights inside the property and therefore leave the street dark, which is what, I'm not talking about the path lights, I'm talking about light fixture type B. Would it make more sense to you to do that, please?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm following there. Those light fixtures are set pretty far back from Meadowbrook Drive. We also will have the advantage of the existing olive trees, proposed olive tree canopy to, if there would be any light spread headed out towards Meadowbrook, we would be blocking that. Is that where you're getting at?
Well, when I drive around Montecito at night, which I do occasionally, it is black from the street, black. And this to me looks like you're going to start lighting it up. And when I see that, I don't feel that it maintains and preserves the semi-rural, low intensity residential community character of the community, the main thing of the general plan. And I'm not trying to say no downlights, but it seems those are olives sitting out there in the middle, right?
The 2 large trees that the downlights are coming out of, those would be large oaks and our
No,
clients.
in the back, where you would actually focus your attention on a daily basis. Are you going to be looking out towards the street or in towards your property, please?
I'm sorry, guys, I'm still not following here. Melissa, you're shaking your
Yeah,
head.
I'm not following either. The royal olives that are on Meadowbrook Drive are, maybe we should go to the L301 real quick and then we can jump back here. The B-type fixtures are only at the live oaks adjacent to the structure. Anything past the building will not be visible from Meadowbrook Drive.
Do you see those areas that are being highlighted by Dave, please? Those trees right there?
Yes.
In the courtyard?
That's what I'm suggesting, that you'll actually use those at night. Do you agree with that or not, please?
Yes, I imagine that space may get used in the evening, but currently we're not proposing any lights back there. Those fixture A's are the bollard lights, which you see in the lower left-hand corner of the page.
For pathways, correct.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have
Sure.
anybody online for public comment? Okay, so we got a public comment letter from your neighbor to the south. Have people had a chance to review this? So I don't have to go through and read it. I don't know how to comment about that. I do want to honor it. Scott, I think you were addressing it. But, okay, so comments, they are on for what? It's at least final, preliminary and final.
Correct.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I think it's a very nice project and if you mention it, you review all the details with some question about.
Yeah, no, the architectural details are fine and you guys.
Maybe
Yeah.
cut back some of the side lighting.
I think that we could further Montecito's dark character by getting those tree lights out of the front yard. And if they'd like to have them in the back where they're going to be able to enjoy them, looking out their windows. That's my feeling.
So
And,
my opinion is I think that, as I've said before, is I think the value and the ability of an oak tree to kind of absorb downlights like that is pretty substantial. And I suspect, so there's not that many of them, and I suspect it's just done to create some accent and enhance kind of the presence of the house. But so I don't think they have they've gone overboard. There's really 3 trees that they've got.
Yeah, so I would like to definitely make a motion for preliminary.
Hold it, time
Final.
out. Does anybody else have any comments? Tip thinks he's got the field. Okay, anybody?
I have one comment.
Yes,
I-
please,
I agree
Stacy.
with Rob. If you want to change out the lawn, because you can only plant agrostis palens, by the way, during the cool season, that you would be fine going to Marathon 1 or 2 with your wucals as well. That's it. Other than that, and I have the lighting, I think is it's very restrained at this point too, so I have no issues with that.
Okay, so members of the board, I don't know if you know the structure of the board, but somebody has to be designated as the neighborhood or community rep. And that kind of is, so I'm always looking out for the neighbors. And it sounds to me like they've addressed this, but I don't know that they have. And I don't know how much the board would like to ask for further documentation like.
The
the
tree is
letter.
very far away from the neighbors and
So
I
you're-
believe that the angle is appropriately address the concern of the.
Okay,
I
very
think he
good.
did too. I mean, I really think they went to great measures to try and move the trees back and to open up that view shed.
Tip, do you have a motion? Anybody
Yeah,
else?
I'll-
Anybody else? Okay, Tip, did you want to make a
I'd
motion?
like to make a motion for preliminary final approval as submitted.
Is there a second
I'll
to that?
second that.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I
Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you. Appreciate your
Thank
help.
you.
You all.
Motion for adjournment, please.
So moved.
Second, anybody?
Second.
All those in favor?
I
Aye. Okay.